Back to BYU Sports Nation. We are live in Studio B alongside Jason Shepard. I am Spencer Linton, making his BYU Sports Nation debut now as a Fox College Sports insider, talking hoops. Specifically right now, Aaron Torres is on BYUSN. Aaron, how are you today?
Well, I'm great. Didn't wake up yesterday necessarily thinking I'd be joining you guys, but this Kevin Young era is moving fast and furious, and so from the outside, I have enjoyed watching how he has slowly built this program over the last 2 months, and blown away by what he's done, which I know we'll talk about, and really excited to break it down with you guys.
Aaron, 64 days ago, before Kevin Young was officially announced and hired as BYU's head coach, most BYU fans were sitting around thinking, what in the world are we going to do now? Mark Pope's gone. Dallin Hall's in the transfer portal. Richie Saunders is in the portal. The roster is depleted. Colin Chandler, your top recruit's going to Kentucky as well. The world is ending. Here we are. You have BYU as a top 20 team. So in those 64 days, what do you feel is the most impressive thing, if there's one element from what Kevin Young has done? Like, what would you tab as number one most impressive?
I mean, I think you could take the holistic, seemingly understanding. Now, I know he has a great staff around him, so I don't want to discredit all the guys and girls behind the scenes, but I think it's just the understanding of how to build a basketball roster in college basketball in 2024, 2025. Listen, I know we're going to, everybody, listen, whether you're a fan of whoever, you get excited about the recruits, the 5 stars, the guys that are projected on mock drafts, but I think as important as anything was retaining 4 guys off of an NCAA tournament team from a year ago. I mean, more than 4, but, 4 or 5 really key guys. And, I think that, again, we love to talk about the 5 stars. We love to talk about the McDonald's All-Americans or the projected lottery picks or Yegor Demon, who's obviously so highly sought after. But the backbone of this team knows this university, knows this program, knows this campus. Certainly they're new to the coaching staff, but have had success in the Big 12. And so I think it's all the puzzle pieces. It's the being fearless going after the best high school prospects in America. It's being fearless and kind of plugging holes through the transfer portal. But as importantly, I think it is retaining, as I said, I think it's 6 total players from last year's team, but obviously 4 to 5 real impact players. I think that's the most impressive thing, is he didn't come in with the, I got to recruit all 5 stars, or I got to completely revamp through the portal. It's a combination of all of those variables.
Aaron, getting the talent here is just part of the equation. Now you've got to integrate everybody and see how everybody meshes with everybody else on the floor. When you look at the talent that BYU has, and I'm referencing the talent coming in, I'm also referencing the guys that you were just talking about that have been retained, that were part of this program last year. When you look at all of the talent, how do you think that talent together can translate actually on the court once the season begins?
Well, one thing always on my show and whenever I'm talking anything, I'm not the X's and O's guy. Kevin Young is the guy that was breaking down film with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant 6 months ago. Not me, believe it or not. That was not part of my daily routine back in January, February, and March. And so, listen, I think that's the $1 million question. And anytime anyone like myself or you guys get excited about a team in, whatever we are, April, May, June, the rival schools will always say, let's see what happens when they take the court. And so that's the coaching staff's job. And I think the cool thing is, as you guys know, coaches now can spend more time in the summer with these guys. So I think it's a little bit of an easier transition. You guys would, I assume everybody isn't quite on campus yet, but I'm guessing we're at a pretty close point to where most of the guys will be very soon, if they're not all here already. And so I just bring it up because you're right. Until we see these, this 12, 13 man roster on the court, until we see how they play together, how they fit together, who exceeds expectations, who doesn't, which returnees fit the mold better than others, there's no way to really project it. All we can project is what a roster looks like on paper. But again, really quickly, it's not just the talent accumulation. It's also how all the pieces seem to fit into the system that Kevin Young, we believe, wants to run based on what we've seen from his time in the NBA. And so that is part of why I'm excited. It's not just the talent accumulation, but it's also how that group seemingly fits together when you put them on a court.
Aaron Torres of Fox Sports is on BYU Sports Nation, has BYU men's basketball as a top 20 team, number 19 specifically in his recent top 25 rankings. We'll talk about that specific number in just a moment, Aaron, but how much patience do BYU fans need to give this team, and time? Because time is patience when you're trying to have a team gel. So how much patience, if you can quantify that, should BYU fans give this team to really become what you think it will become?
I mean, if you don't win a national championship, it's a wasted season, right? I mean, that's how fan. No, I'm kidding. Listen, you guys have a better pulse of the fan base than I do. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know. But listen, I don't want to oversell, but I also don't want to undersell Kevin Young's experience either. Obviously, this is, I guess you would say, his first marquee head coaching job. He's been in that one seat over for a couple years now. So he's new to head coaching, at least at this level. He's new to the sport in general. And again, you have whatever it is, 6, 7, 8 guys that are new to this campus and 12, 13 guys that are new to this coaching staff. So I would assume that, I think everybody's going to be patient. I think everybody's going to enjoy the highs of, the excitement going into next season. And then, of course, the other thing, and I know we'll probably get into it here momentarily, but the Big 12 is just so good. And, even you go back to last year, I mean, look at Kansas, the way that they struggled, a historically dominant program. BYU goes into Fog Allen and beats them, and Kansas was a team that struggled on the road all year. Baylor's, you guys know the Big 12 landscape, and it's only going to get tougher with Arizona certainly leading the charge of teams coming in. So I think that's part of it as well. You guys know the pulse of the fan base, the expectations of the fan base better than I would. The only reason I'd be concerned is because the league is so darn good. But I'll tell you this, there's going to be some teams that go into a lot of matchups just outmanned, and we don't have to name those teams now. We don't need to. Nobody needs any strays here in late June. But I bring it up because there's going to be a lot of teams that just go into some of those matchups outmanned and just don't have the guys. I don't think that BYU is going to be one of those teams, and that's a positive, obviously, going into the next season.
Well, let's stay in that conversation then. You mentioned you're obviously adding 4 teams. You lose 2, but you add 4 others. And obviously, of the 4 coming in, from a basketball standpoint, Arizona's the one that you certainly zero in on in terms of basketball program and their history. But where do you think this BYU team fits in the hierarchy of the Big 12 heading into year 2 in the conference?
Yeah, I hope this doesn't sound disparaging, but, I think everybody who covers this sport, it feels like there is a clear top 4 in this league. Kansas, listen, struggled, as I said, by Kansas standards last year, but they return a bunch of key pieces. And then, oh, by the way, added a ton through the portal. And by the way, I appreciate you guys popping up that graphic. I mean, that's how I see the league, is I think there's a clear top 4. Houston returns a ton, although they obviously lose Jamal Shed. Iowa State returns virtually everybody of note off of a Sweet 16 team that was really a player or 2 away from going to the Elite 8. I think Baylor's done as good of a job as anybody in the portal, adding Jeremy Roach from Duke, adding Norchad Omier from Miami, 2 players who, oh, by the way, have Final Four experience. So those, to me, feel like the clear top 4. And then as everybody can see, if you're watching, and again, I appreciate the graphics team putting that together, I think Arizona, Kansas State, BYU are in that next group. And it's just because those first 4 are so good. Kansas State, I think this past weekend, adding Coleman Hawkins, I think elevates them into that second tier.
Sure.
Arizona's a really interesting one because they've been very good out of conference, but at times have weirdly struggled in Pac-12 play. Since Tommy Lloyd took over, you'd think it'd be the opposite. That the Pac-12 has been down. They have been a great program, but they've really been good out of conference and then have struggled once you get into league play. So they're probably the one that I'm most intrigued by, just because the talent on paper looks great, but obviously we got to see it all come together once the games are actually played.
All right, Aaron. BYU hasn't won an NCAA tournament first round game in 13 years.
Wow.
So
I wouldn't have guessed that.
What is the minimum threshold? Is 1 win in the tournament good enough for this team with this much talent under Kevin Young in his first year?
Well, this is the gift and the curse of college basketball, is so much of a season is deemed a success or a failure based on the NCAA tournament, right? I go back to the guy that replaced the guy that Mark Pope is now at Kentucky because John Calipari didn't win in the tournament. And every time I say anything nice about Coach Cal, look at what he Well, they finished second in the SEC, and most people believe that was the toughest the SEC has ever been. But he didn't win in March when it mattered. And so now he's at Arkansas. Now Mark Pope is at Kentucky. Now, of course, Kevin Young is replacing him at BYU. And so that's just an example of how fickle the tournament can be. And so it's just, I always have trouble, like, in a perfect world, yeah, I look at this roster on paper, and I think it's absolutely a team that should be able to win at minimum a tournament game. And then again, if the pieces click, if the vets kind of, find their spots in this offense, if Yegor Demon is as good as advertised, then yeah, it's a team that could go on a deeper run. But I think it's absolutely fair to say you should be winning a tournament game with this group. But again, I also just hate, part of the reason we love the tournament is because of the upsets. And I hate that really 11 months worth of work can go down the tubes, and your season, and I'm not saying BYU fans would deem it this way, but your season can be deemed a failure if you have one bad night in March.
What is this balanced logic you bring to the fan conversation here? Oh my gosh. Hey,
it's tough because, and you guys know, like, anytime you say anything positive, it's a cascade from the other side of what are Utah, and it's like, and again, I don't mean to bring up the former coach who replaced the guy that I keep talking about, but every time somebody says something negative about John, like, I know this isn't a Mark Pope conversation. I'm not trying to turn it into that, but it's like, Kentucky fans are acting like they just replaced the worst coach that's ever existed. And I think to have the regular season success that they did last year is going to be a challenge for your now former coach in year one, but nobody wants to hear that right now. And so, and I assume it's probably the same at BYU. The sky's the limit, and there should be excitement. To be clear, there should be excitement. I'll be honest, I didn't know what to make of this hire when it became official, there in mid-April. And I think it's a theme of this conversation is like, I think Kevin Young has done about as good of a job as advertised. And so I don't want all this positive energy to be ruined if there's one bad night or one bad foul call in March or something like that. I don't want everybody coming back to this one and saying, hey, Torres, you got us way too excited about this team back last June. I don't think that would happen, but you never know.
Hey, follow him, Aaron_Torres on X if you want more of this goodness. Fox Sports College Basketball Insider. Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron.
Gentlemen, thank you both. Have a great day. I look forward to speaking soon. Thank you.
Let's go. Up next.